Hello, my name is Cara Charles, and I'm a graduate student in the Cognition, Aging, and Brain Imaging Lab here at UW Milwaukee. I am happy to say that we have recently published an article in the Psychology and Aging Journal about a study we conducted titled Age Related Differences in Associative Inference Are Larger Than Differences in Direct Associative Memory. This work was supervised by Dr. Caitlin Bowman, and today I'm going to be telling you about the main points of the study. So for this project, I was interested in how people use memory to make new inferences about the world, a process known as episodic inference. An episodic inference involves having two distinct yet overlapping experiences. For example, imagine in week one, you see this woman with this very distinct blue VW bug. And then a week later, you see a man driving the exact same car. Each of these experiences would be what we call direct memories because they are something that you experience directly in the real world. And from these events, you can use the overlapping information, the blue VW bug, to infer a relationship between elements that you have never seen together, in this case, the man and the woman. You might use these separate memories to infer that the man and the woman share some kind of relationship, and this is what is called episodic inference. It involves making the indirect connection between pieces of information encountered at different times. And while there have been studies showing that young adults are able to make episodic inferences, it was an open question as to how well older adults would be able to make them, especially since we know that the ability to remember direct experiences typically declines at older age, even for those who do not have an age-related cognitive disorder like Alzheimer's disease or some other kind of dementia. Thus, we aimed to determine if there were any age deficits to episodic inference above and beyond any deficits in direct memory. So to address our aim of understanding how well older adults are able to make episodic inferences, I designed an experiment where participants had to learn overlapping word pairs across two study phases. Participants were then tested on their memory for the pairs and how they were learned. For this project, I collected a sample of 83 younger adults, mostly from the UWM community, and a sample of 80 older adults from the surrounding Milwaukee community for a total of 163 participants. Some of you watching this may have participated and will recognize both myself and the following test procedure, so thank you for your participation and contributing to this super robust sample. So starting with the first study phase, participants might have learned an A-B pair like apple bucket and then had to indicate that they formed a mental image by saying yes or no, I formed an image of this pair. Then in the following BC study phase, they may have learned a pair like apple tree. You can see that the BC pair shares the word apple in common with the initial AB pair, thus apple is the overlapping B item. Again, participants were asked to form a mental image. In the testing phase, participants were given two kinds of tests. A forced choice test that measures how well participants remember which pairs they learned, and a source choice test that assesses one's ability to remember if they learned this pair directly in the study phases, or if they had to infer a relationship using an overlapping item, like in this case, apple, to create an AC pair. So here you can see that this is a test of direct memory, where the correct answer would be apple, since train and apple were paired together in the BC study phase. And you would want to identify this as a direct pair since you learned it directly within that study phase. In this next example, you can see that neither of the choices were paired with the train cue during study. However, you could form the pair apple bucket because both of these words were paired with apple. This would be considered an indirect inference pair, so you would want to mark it as indirect on the source choice test. These AB and BC study phases, along with the testing phase, repeat 3 more times with different word pairings for a total of 4 cycles. So now we can begin to unpack the results. Here is a graph showing how well younger and older adults did when asked to pick which 2 items were associated either directly or indirectly, with indirect pairings being our measure of inference. The first thing that I'll point out is that the numbers on the left side of the graph start at 0.5 or 50% accuracy. And this is how well we would expect people to do if they had learned nothing and were totally guessing during the testing trials. Both the young and older groups are doing much better than that, which means that both groups were able to learn well and were able to make inferences. The second thing to note is that everyone does better overall on direct memory than on inference, which tells us that making inference Making inferences is harder than remembering something directly and requires a little bit of extra thought to do so successfully for both young and older adults. And lastly, we found that young adults in the dark gray bars did better on both direct and indirect memory than older adults, but that the difference was larger for inferences. So that means that making inferences may be especially tricky as we get older, and it isn't just about failing to remember our direct experiences. It's the combination of having to remember the direct experiences and the extra effort that it takes to form that inference when needed. So now let's look at how well people could remember whether a tested pair was a direct memory or an inference that they had to make. The one thing that we thought might happen was once people made an inference, they might forget that it was an inference and not something that they experienced directly. But going back to our blue VW bug example from the beginning, maybe once you made the connection between the man and the woman, you combine all those memories together and you forget that you actually had two separate experiences, one with the man, one with the woman. And so to test this idea, we looked at the judgments people made on the test about whether something was a direct or indirect pair. And so here I'm showing you how often people mistakenly said that indirect inference pairs had been learned directly. And we see that older adults did that more often than younger adults. And it seems that older adults were more likely to combine across separate direct memories and lose the distinction between what was experienced directly and what they formed as an inference. So interestingly, what I'm showing you here in this first set of bars is when the actual inference decision was correct. So when people made the woman-man indirect connection successfully. When people get the inference wrong, there is no difference between younger and older adults. That means that this confusion between direct memories and inference only seems to happen to older adults after they have made a correct inference decision. So it's something about the inference process itself that is causing this. So in sum, our data are showing that making an inference is more difficult than remembering something you learned directly for both age groups, with a slight increase in difficulty attributed to older age. And making inferences also comes at a cost of sometimes forgetting where you learned the information for both age groups again, but also, once again, with an increase of difficulty for older adults. So these are the main points, the main takeaways from this work. So where do we go from here? Knowing that older adults struggle with both memory for direct experience and inferences, I am working to develop a strategy that might help with both types of memories. I'm not going to tell you too much about it so that I don't give away the details to anyone who might come and participate in that study, which is ultimately going to serve as my dissertation project. So look out for future updates with the details of that project. And if you have already been a CABI participant, you may also be hearing from me in the next couple of months to see if you'd be willing to come in for another study. If you are interested in learning more about the project I discussed in this presentation, there will be a link in the description directing you towards the full publication. So thank you for listening, and an extra big thank you if you've participated in this study or any other CABI Lab projects. Our work would not be possible without the engagement from those of you in our community, and we appreciate your past and hopefully future participation. Thank you so much.